Thank you, Daddy. 3 words. That's all it took to shatter over a year of silence. But this story doesn't begin in a courtroom with frozen faces and streaming tears. It begins 6 months earlier in a small-town diner that smelled like coffee and grilled onions, on an ordinary Wednesday evening that would become the most important night of 4 people's lives. It begins with a man who thought his heart was full. It begins with 2 little girls who had lost everything. And it begins with 5 words, 5 simple words spoken by a starving child to a stranger that would change the meaning of family forever. Can we eat with you? 6 months earlier, October 2019. The Riverside Family Diner sat on the corner of Main and Cedar Street, a squat brick building with a neon sign that had been buzzing the same way since 1987. The windows were foggy with decades of grease and condensation, and the booths were patched with duct tape in colors that didn't quite match the original vinyl. It was the kind of place that tourists drove past without a second glance, but locals cherished like an old friend. Inside, the air hung thick with the smell of coffee that had been brewing too long, bacon grease from the morning rush, and something indefinable that spoke of comfort and constancy. The linoleum floor was worn thin in paths between the tables, testament to 20 years of servers carrying plates of meatloaf and mashed potatoes to the same familiar faces. Marcus Webb pushed through the front door at exactly 6 p.m., same as every Wednesday for the past 2 years. The bell above the door chimed its tired greeting, and Martha Greer glanced up from behind the counter with a nod of recognition before returning to her receipts. "Come on, buddy," Marcus said, holding the door for his son. "Our table's waiting." Leo Webb bounded inside, a small tornado of energy with a mess of dark curls and soft brown eyes that made Marcus's chest ache every time he looked at them. Those were Sarah's eyes, her exact shade of warm chocolate brown, complete with the same golden flecks that caught the light when she laughed. "Daddy, guess what?" Leo was already chattering as they made their way to their usual booth by the window. "Mrs. Patterson said my drawing was the best one today. She put it on the special wall, the one by the door where everyone can see it." "Yeah?" Marcus slid into the booth across from his son, the cracked vinyl creaking beneath him. "What did you draw?" "Our house." Leo climbed onto his knees so he could see over the table properly. "But I made the sky purple because purple is prettier than blue. And I put Mama's garden in the front yard, even though we don't plant flowers there anymore." Marcus felt the familiar ache bloom in his chest, the one that had lived there since the morning 3 years ago, when Sarah's heart had simply stopped beating. She had been 32 years old, healthy, happy. She had laughed at something Leo said at breakfast, kissed Marcus goodbye at the door, and by lunchtime, she was gone. Lupus complications, the doctors explained later, as if a medical term could make sense of a world that had suddenly lost all its color. "She would love that drawing," Marcus managed, his voice steady despite the tightness in his throat. "Purple was her favorite color, you know." "I know, you told me." Leo's face was serious in the way only a 5-year-old's can be. "Daddy, do you think Mama gets lonely up there? In heaven?" Marcus set down the menu he'd been pretending to read. "I think she has lots of friends up there, buddy, and I think she watches us every single day, especially on Wednesdays." Because this was her favorite place too? Because this was her favorite place too. Leo had been only 2 years old when Sarah died, too young to remember her clearly, too young to hold on to more than fragments and feelings. But Marcus had made sure his son knew her anyway. Every night he told Leo stories about his mother, how she laughed, what she loved, the way she sang off key in the shower and danced in the kitchen while making breakfast. In Leo's mind, those stories had become memories, and Sarah was as real to him as if she'd never left. "Maybe we should order her favorite dessert," Leo said suddenly, his face brightening. "The apple pie with the crumbly top. So she knows we're thinking about her." Marcus's throat tightened. Yeah, buddy, let's do that. He had just raised his hand to flag down Amy, their usual server, when he felt it. A tug on his jacket sleeve. Small, hesitant, barely there. He turned, and the world stopped. Two little girls stood beside his table. They couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Tiny, fragile things that looked like they might shatter if you breathed too hard. They wore matching pink dresses that had probably been pretty once, but were now faded and torn at the hems, covered in dirt and something that looked horribly like dried blood. Their feet were bare, caked with mud and fresh cuts that had left small, reddish-brown footprints across the diner's worn floor. But it was their eyes that Marcus would remember until the day he died. The taller girl had fierce green eyes, still bright despite the exhaustion that weighed down her small frame. But her sister, the smaller one, had paler eyes, a soft, haunted green that seemed to hold all the sorrow in the world. Both sets of eyes carried a weight that no child should ever know. Ancient, hollow, broken. The taller girl still had her fingers wrapped around Marcus's sleeve. She looked up at him, and when she spoke, her voice cracked like thin ice on a frozen pond. Can we eat with you? 5 words. 5 simple words that hit Marcus Webb like a freight train to the chest. Before he could respond, a sharp voice cut through the diner like a knife through warm butter. Hey, how did you two get in here? Martha Greer came barreling across the restaurant, her face flushed red with anger. She was a stout woman in her late 50s with steel gray hair, pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch her weathered face. She'd owned and operated this diner single-handedly since her husband died 15 years ago, and she ran it the way she ran everything in her life, with an iron fist, a sharp tongue, and zero tolerance for anything that disrupted the natural order of things. This isn't a shelter, Martha snapped, reaching for the taller girl's arm. You can't just wander in here begging from my paying customers. Out, both of you, right now. The smaller girl, the one with the pale, haunted eyes, let out a whimper so soft it was barely audible. She pressed herself against her sister's side, her whole body trembling like a leaf in a storm. A fierce protectiveness surged through Marcus, hot and sudden and overwhelming. Don't touch her. He was on his feet before he realized he'd moved, positioning his body between Martha and the two children. At 6'2", with shoulders broadened by years of carpentry work, Marcus Webb was not a small man. And right now, every inch of him was radiating a protective fury that surprised even himself. Look at them, he said, his voice quiet but carrying an edge of steel. Really, look at them, Martha. Martha's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes traveled downward, taking in the cuts on their bare feet, the bruises modeling their thin arms. The way they swayed as if standing upright required more strength than they had left to give. Something flickered across her weathered face, something almost like shame. They asked if they could eat with us, Marcus said steadily, and the answer is yes. The girls' names were Lily and Hope. They were twins, 5 years old. Lily talked. Hope didn't. She used to talk all the time, Lily whispered, her small hands wrapped around a cup of hot chocolate, like it was the most precious thing in the entire world. More than me even. She never stopped talking. But when the lady came to tell us that Mama wasn't coming home anymore, Lily's voice cracked. Hope just stopped. That was 7 months ago. She hasn't said one single word since then. Marcus looked at Hope, at this tiny, silent child with her pale green eyes and her grief so heavy it had stolen her voice. She sat pressed against her sister's side, her gaze fixed on the table, her thin body still trembling. What happened tonight? Marcus asked gently, keeping his voice low and soft. How did you two end up here? Lily's young face darkened with something no 5-year-old should know. We ran away from the foster lady, Mrs. Pritchard. Why did you run away? Because she locked us in the basement. Lily's voice was flat now, emotionless, like she was reciting facts from a school lesson. She said she was tired of hearing me cry at night. She said if we made one more sound, she would send us to a place where bad kids go and never ever come back. Marcus felt rage building in his chest, pure white-hot rage that made his hands shake. How did you get out? Hope found a window. For the first time, something like pride flickered in Lily's fierce green eyes. It was really high up on the wall and really small, but she climbed up on some boxes and pushed it open. We squeezed through and we ran. We walked and walked until we saw the lights from this place. Why did you choose me? Marcus asked. Out of everyone in this restaurant, why did you come to my table? Lily looked at him with those ancient, heartbreaking eyes. Because of how you were looking at him. She pointed one thin finger at Leo. The way you smiled at him. The way you touched his hair when he was talking. My mama used to look at us exactly like that. She paused and her next words cracked something open inside Marcus that he didn't know could still break. And I thought maybe you had enough love left over for two more. Leo had been listening quietly, his grilled cheese forgotten and growing cold on his plate. Now he looked at Hope, really looked at her, and did something that would change everything. He climbed down from his seat, walked around the table, and sat down right beside her. My mama died too, he said softly. 3 years ago. I cried so much. I thought maybe I would never stop crying. But you know what? Hope didn't respond, didn't move, but her pale eyes, those haunted, hollow eyes, flickered toward him. My daddy told me that it's okay to feel sad, and it's okay to be quiet when you don't have words. But it's also okay to let people help you. Leo's voice was earnest, certain, carrying the simple wisdom that only young children possess. Because that's what mamas want for us. They want someone to take care of us when they can't do it themselves anymore. Hope stared at him for a long, frozen moment. And then, so slowly that Marcus almost missed it, she reached out and took Leo's hand. Leo looked up at his father, his mother's brown eyes shining with something fierce and determined. Daddy, they need us. Can they please come home with us? Before Marcus could find words to answer, the diner's front door swung open with a gust of cold October air. A woman in a rumpled blazer stepped inside, a badge glinting on her belt. I'm Diana Chen, Child Protective Services. Someone called about 2 minors in distress? And Marcus Webb, a man who had spent the last 3 years carefully rebuilding a shattered life from broken pieces, felt those pieces shifting again beneath his feet, rearranging themselves into a new pattern he couldn't yet see but somehow already knew. 3 days later, Marcus sat in a cramped, fluorescent-lit office at the Baxter County Social Services Building, across a cluttered desk from Diana Chen. She looked different out of the diner's warm lighting, more tired, more worn, the kind of exhaustion that came from years of trying to save children in a system designed to fail them. Before I take you to see the girls, Diana said, there's something I think you need to have. She slid a worn envelope across the desk. It was soft from handling, the edges frayed and yellowed, clearly opened and resealed multiple times. 2 names were written on the front in careful feminine handwriting. For my darling girls, Lily and Hope, to be opened on your 18th birthday. We found it in their mother's belongings when we processed her effects, Diana explained quietly. She wrote it about a week before she passed away. Almost like she knew somehow. Marcus's hands trembled as he opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. My sweet girls, if you're reading this, then I'm not there with you anymore. And I'm so sorry. I'm sorry in ways I don't have enough words to explain. I'm sorry I won't see you start first grade. I'm sorry I won't be there when you lose your first tooth, or have your first sleepover, or fall in love for the first time. I'm sorry I won't get to hold you when the world gets scary, or cheer for you when you accomplish something brave, or tell you every single day how incredibly proud I am of the amazing women you're going to become. I want you to know something important. Being your mama was the greatest gift of my entire life. Every tired morning when I could barely keep my eyes open, every double shift that kept me away from you, every night I fell asleep still wearing my work clothes because I was too exhausted to change, I would do all of it again, 1,000 times over, just for one more day with my girls. Lily, my fierce, brave one, you have a fire burning inside you, a fire that will light up every room you ever walk into. Don't you ever let anyone put that fire out, you hear me? The world is going to try to make you smaller, quieter, easier to handle. Don't let it. You fight, baby girl. You fight for yourself, and you fight for your sister. You've always been her protector, even when you were both tiny babies in my arms. I'm counting on you to keep being that. Hope, my gentle, tender-hearted girl. Your heart is so big it scares me sometimes. You feel everything so deeply, so completely. The world isn't always kind to hearts like yours. But listen to me. That softness is not weakness. It's your superpower. Don't ever let anyone harden you or make you believe that caring too much is a flaw. The world desperately needs gentle hearts like yours. Now here's what I need you both to remember. The most important thing I'll ever tell you. Somewhere out there in this big world is a person who will choose you. Not because they're required to, not because it's their job or their obligation, but because they look at you and see exactly what I see. Two perfect, precious, completely irreplaceable souls who deserve all the love in the universe. Wait for that person, my darlings. And when they find you, because they will find you, I promise you they will, let them in. Let them love you. Open your hearts, even though it's terrifying. Because you are so, so worthy of being loved. I'll be watching over you from wherever I end up. Always. Every purple sky at sunset, every butterfly that lands near you, every warm breeze on a summer afternoon. That's me, saying hello, saying I love you, saying I'm so proud of my girls. Forever and ever and always, Mama Marcus sat in his truck in the parking lot for nearly 30 minutes. Rachel Torres's letter clutched against his chest, tears streaming down his face unchecked. He thought about Sarah, about the letter she'd written for Leo during those final weeks, the one Marcus kept in his nightstand drawer and read on the hardest days when the grief threatened to swallow him whole, about the promise she'd extracted from him in those last hours, her hand weak but insistent in his. Don't let losing me make you small, Marcus. Don't let grief close your heart. Promise me you'll keep it open. He thought about these two little girls, abandoned, traumatized, failed by every institution and every adult who was supposed to protect them, who had walked miles on bloody bare feet through the October cold because they saw something in a stranger at a diner window, something that reminded them of their mother. He thought about Leo, about the way his son had climbed down from his seat without being asked and taken Hope's hand, about the certainty in his young voice when he'd said, "They need us, Daddy." Marcus carefully folded Rachel's letter, pressed it against his heart for one more moment, and then placed it in his shirt pocket, right next to where he could feel it with every beat. And then he walked back into that building and spoke the words that would change everything. "I want to adopt them," he told Diana Chen. "Both of them." Diana stared at him across her cluttered desk. "Mr. Webb, I already know what you're going to say. I'm a single father. I work a blue-collar job. I don't have extra money. I already have one child who depends on me. The system doesn't look favorably on people in my situation." "That's all true, yes. I don't care." Marcus leaned forward, his voice steady and certain. "Those two girls have been shuffled through 3 different foster homes in 7 months. They've been rejected by every family that was supposed to give them a chance. A woman who was paid to care for them locked them in a basement because she didn't want to hear a 5-year-old crying for her dead mother. And you're going to tell me the system has their best interests at heart? Diana was quiet for a long, heavy moment. No, she finally admitted. I'm telling you the system is broken, badly broken, but it's the system we have to work within. And if you want those girls, you're going to have to fight harder than you've ever fought for anything in your life. Then I'll fight, Marcus said simply. Whatever it takes, however long it takes. The next 4 months were the hardest of Marcus's life. Social workers invaded his small house on Maple Street like an occupying army, examining every cabinet, every closet, every corner. They questioned his parenting choices, his work schedule, his financial decisions. A court-appointed psychologist probed into his grief over Sarah, his coping mechanisms, his deepest fears and darkest thoughts. A skeptical judge looked at him across a courtroom like he was delusional for thinking he could raise 3 children alone on a carpenter's salary. But through all of it, there were the visits. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, Marcus sat in a sterile visitation room with cheerful yellow walls that seemed to mock the sadness of the children who passed through. And he watched 2 broken little girls slowly, cautiously begin to trust him. Lily started calling him Uncle Marcus, then tentatively, almost Daddy. She talked constantly now, about school, about her dreams, about her mother. It was like a dam had finally broken inside her, and all the words she'd been holding back for months came flooding out in a torrent. Hope remained silent, but she found other ways to communicate. She brought Marcus things, drawings she'd made with careful concentration, interesting rocks she discovered on the playground, a dandelion that had somehow survived the first frost. She would place each offering in his palm with solemn ceremony, her pale green eyes searching his face for his reaction. And every single time, Marcus would accept her gift like it was the most precious treasure he'd ever received. Because it was. Each small offering was a piece of trust, carefully extended. A wordless question, will you stay? Will you see me? Will you still be here tomorrow? He always stayed. He always saw her, and he was always there the next time. 5 months into the grueling process, the case was finally going well. The home study had come back positive. The psychological evaluation was favorable. Diana had written a glowing letter of recommendation. For the first time since this journey began, Marcus allowed himself to feel something like hope. Then his lawyer called. We have a serious problem. Rebecca Hartley was a young attorney who had taken Marcus's case pro bono because, as she explained in their first meeting, some fights are worth having even when you don't get paid for them. Donna Pritchard has filed a formal complaint against you with the family court. Marcus felt ice crystallizing in his veins. The foster mother, the one who locked them in a basement? The investigation into her conduct was closed last month. Insufficient evidence to proceed. Rebecca's voice was tight with barely contained anger. And now she's turned the tables. She's claiming you harassed her, that you coached the girls to fabricate accusations against her, that you're mentally unstable and completely unfit to be a parent. That's insane. That's completely insane. It doesn't matter if it's insane, Marcus. What matters is that it creates reasonable doubt in the court's mind. The judge could delay the adoption indefinitely. They could open an entirely new investigation. They could take them away from me. Yes. A heavy pause. Marcus, I need you to understand what we're dealing with. Donna Pritchard isn't just trying to hurt you personally. She's trying to prove that she was right all along, that those girls are too damaged to save, that anyone who wants them must be delusional or have ulterior motives. Why? Why would she do that? Because if you succeed in adopting them, it proves that she failed them. And some people would rather destroy others than admit they were wrong. Marcus closed his eyes and breathed deeply. For 5 months he had fought. For 5 months he had believed with everything in him. And now, when he was finally so close he could taste it, what do I do now? I don't know yet, Rebecca admitted honestly, but I know this much. If you give up, she wins. And those two little girls go back into a system that has failed them every single time. Marcus thought about Hope's silent offerings, placed so carefully in his hands, about Lily calling him almost daddy with such desperate hope in her voice, about Leo asking every single night at bedtime when his sisters were finally coming home. I'm not giving up, he said firmly. Not ever, not on them. Against his lawyer's explicit instructions, Marcus drove to Donna Pritchard's house. It was a Victorian on the outskirts of town, beautiful in a cold, sterile way, with a pristine, manicured lawn and a wraparound porch painted crisp white. There were no toys scattered in the yard, no bicycles leaning against the fence, no evidence at all that children lived or played there. Just perfection, as empty and lifeless as a magazine photograph. Donna answered the door on the second knock. She was smaller than Marcus had imagined from the stories, thin, sharp-featured, somewhere in her early 60s, with eyes that had the flat, dead quality of riverstones. She looked at him without any trace of surprise, as if she'd been expecting this visit. Mr. Webb, I wondered how long it would take you to show up at my door. Why are you doing this? Marcus kept his voice level with effort. You know perfectly well those girls aren't lying. Do I? She smiled, but nothing in her eyes changed. What I know is that they're damaged goods, difficult, unmanageable. I know that every single family who's tried to help them has given up within months. What makes you so arrogant to think you'll be any different? Because I'm not going to give up on them, ever. That's exactly what they all say. She leaned against the doorframe, studying him with clinical detachment. You know, I used to be just like you, 20 years ago, full of righteous certainty. I thought love could fix anything. I thought caring enough would be sufficient. What happened to you? Something flickered deep in her flat eyes. Pain so old and so deeply buried, it had fossilized into something almost unrecognizable. I had a daughter once, Emma. She was only 6 years old when she died. Cancer. She fought it for 2 agonizing years, and in the end, it killed her anyway while I watched helplessly. Donna's voice remained eerily calm. I poured every single ounce of love I possessed into that child, and she still died screaming, begging me to make the pain stop. And I couldn't do anything. Nothing. Marcus felt something shift painfully in his chest. Not quite sympathy, but understanding of a kind. After that, I told myself I'd dedicate my life to helping other children. Foster care. Giving back. Making Emma's death mean something. Donna's voice hardened like cooling steel. But you know what I learned instead? Some children simply cannot be saved. Some damage runs too deep to ever heal. You pour and pour love into them, and it just disappears, like water into sand. Like it was never there at all. Lily and Hope aren't like that. They're exactly like that. The quiet one, Hope, she'll never speak again. Never. I've seen children like her before. The trauma has permanently broken something inside her that cannot be repaired. And you, she looked at him with something almost resembling pity. You're going to completely destroy yourself trying to fix what cannot be fixed. You're wrong. Perhaps, she shrugged carelessly. But one day, when this all falls apart exactly as I'm telling you it will, you'll remember this conversation. And maybe then you'll understand that I was trying to do you a favor. She closed the door in his face. That night, Marcus sat alone on his back porch in the cold October darkness. A bottle of whiskey stood open beside him, the first drink he'd even considered since the night of Sarah's funeral. He stared at the amber liquid and thought about Donna Pritchard's words, about the hollow deadness in her eyes, about her daughter Emma. dying at 6 years old in a hospital bed, crying out for a mother who couldn't save her no matter how desperately she tried. He thought about Hope's unbroken silence, about the way she still flinched violently at unexpected sounds, about what her therapist had said during the last evaluation, choosing words carefully. Selective mutism triggered by severe trauma is extremely complex. Recovery is possible, but there are no guarantees. Some children never fully regain speech. He thought about what failure would actually look like. Another rejection for two girls who had already been rejected more times than any child should endure. More proof that nobody truly wanted them, that they were exactly as Donna Pritchard claimed, too damaged to save. Maybe she's right, whispered a treacherous voice in the darkest corner of his mind. Maybe some damage really can't be undone. Maybe all you're doing is setting them up for one more devastating fall. He reached for the whiskey bottle, lifted it, started to pour. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from Diana Chen. Thought you should see this. Lily made it during our session today. Attached was a photo of a crayon drawing. 4 stick figures stood in front of a house beneath a purple sky. A tall figure with brown hair, a small figure with curly dark hair, and 2 little figures with matching brown pigtails holding hands. Above them, in careful, determined 5-year-old letters, Marcus stared at that drawing for a very long time. Then he poured every drop of the whiskey into the grass, went inside, and called his lawyer. I need you to schedule a direct hearing with the judge. I want to address Donna Pritchard's complaint myself, in person. Marcus, that's incredibly risky. If the judge doesn't believe you, I don't care about the risk. Those girls have spent their entire lives watching adults fail them. They've watched every person who promised to protect them eventually walk away. I am not going to be one more adult who gives up when things get hard. What happened next was something Marcus never expected. Word spread through the community about Donna Pritchard's vindictive complaint, about the single father fighting against impossible odds to adopt 2 orphan little girls, about a system that seemed determined to prevent a loving home from forming, and one by one, people Marcus barely knew started coming forward. Martha Greer, the diner owner who had tried to throw the girls out that first night, arrived at Marcus's front door carrying a handwritten letter, 4 pages long. I've been running that diner for 23 years. I've witnessed a lot of people at their best and their absolute worst. When those 2 little girls walked through my door that night, I saw a problem to be dealt with, a disruption. When Marcus Webb stood up to protect them, I saw a father. I was wrong, and he was right. It takes a big person to admit when they have made a mistake, and I'm admitting it now. Those girls need a father like him. If this court can't recognize that obvious truth, then our system is even more broken than I feared. There were others, so many others. Amy, the server, wrote about watching Marcus visit those girls week after week, always patient, always gentle, always kind. His boss at the carpentry shop wrote about his work ethic, his reliability, his fundamental decency as a human being. Sarah's best friend wrote about the kind of husband and father Marcus had been, and still was, even 3 years after loss had shattered his world. Leo's kindergarten teacher wrote about a little boy who talked constantly about my sisters who are coming home soon, with absolute certainty and joy. 17 letters in total. 17 people who took time from their lives to put pen to paper and say, this man is worthy. This man should be their father. The morning of the final hearing, Marcus received a hand-delivered envelope. Inside was a letter written in careful, shaky handwriting, Leo's handwriting, though Marcus had sat beside him and helped spell the more difficult words. But every single thought, every feeling, every word of meaning was purely Leo's own. Dear Judge, my name is Leo Webb. I am 5 years old. I want to tell you about my dad. When my mama died, My dad cried every night. He thought I didn't hear him, but I did. He was really, really sad. But he still made me breakfast every morning. He still read me stories every night. He still told me he loved me even when his heart was all broken up inside. My mama used to say that love isn't like a pie. You don't run out of it when you share pieces with other people. Love grows bigger and bigger the more you give it away. There are two girls named Lily and Hope who need a daddy. Their mama died too, just like mine. They're really scared and really sad, just like I was. But my dad isn't scared of sad kids. He wants to help them. He says that's what families are supposed to do. I want to share my daddy with Lily and Hope. I want them to be my sisters. I want us all to be a family together. Please let them come home. Love, Leo Webb, age 5. At the very bottom of the letter, in different handwriting, shaky, unpracticed, like someone who hadn't formed letters in a very long time, were two small words, and beneath them, a careful signature. Marcus stared at those two words until his vision blurred completely with tears. It was the first thing Hope had written in over a year. The Baxter County Family Courthouse was an aging brick building that smelled of old paper, industrial floor cleaner, and decades of hope and heartbreak. Marcus sat in the front row of the small courtroom, Leo pressed against his right side, Rebecca Hartley on his left. Behind them, filling the wooden benches to capacity, sat the people who had written letters. Martha Greer in her diner apron, twisting a paper napkin in her weathered hands. Amy dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Diana Chen sitting straight and professional, but with visible tension in every line of her body. Neighbors, co-workers, friends, people Marcus saw every day, and some he barely knew, all gathered in this room because they believed in something. The bailiff brought Lily and Hope in through a side door, a social worker hovering anxiously behind them. The instant Lily spotted Marcus, she broke free from the social worker's gentle grip and sprinted across the courtroom, throwing her thin arms around his waist with desperate strength. "I'm so scared," she whispered against his chest. "I'm more scared than I've ever been." "Me too," Marcus admitted honestly, stroking her tangled hair. "But no matter what happens in this room today, I need you to remember something. I made you a promise. I'm not going anywhere. Ever." Hope approached more slowly, her pale green eyes fixed on the floor. But when she reached Marcus, she didn't hesitate. She simply took his hand in her small one and held on tight. Judge Catherine Morrison entered through the door behind the bench. A silver-haired woman in her 60s with sharp, observant eyes and the weathered look of someone who had witnessed far too much human tragedy and triumph to be easily impressed by either. She had served as a family court judge for over 2 decades. She had heard every possible story. She had made decisions that shattered lives and decisions that saved them. She settled into her chair, adjusted her reading glasses, and opened the thick file before her. "Mr. Webb, this court has carefully reviewed your petition for adoption of the minor children, Lily and Hope Torres." Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Lily's grip on his hand tightened painfully. "I want to be very clear about several things before I render my decision." Judge Morrison looked up from the file, her expression completely unreadable. "This case is highly unusual. You are a single father with a modest income. You already have one child who depends on you. You work a physically demanding job with irregular hours. On paper, Mr. Webb, you are far from an ideal candidate for adoption." Leo pressed closer against Marcus's side. In the gallery behind them, someone let out a shaky breath. "Furthermore, serious allegations have been raised against you by a licensed foster care provider. While our investigation found these allegations to be unsubstantiated, they have nonetheless created questions that this court was obligated to consider carefully." The courtroom was absolutely silent. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears like thunder. However, that single word, that beautiful, miraculous word, hung in the air like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. I have also reviewed 17 letters submitted to this court by members of your community, 17 individuals who took time from their lives to advocate on your behalf. Judge Morrison removed her glasses and set them on the bench. I have read evaluation reports showing remarkable improvement in both girls since you entered their lives. I have reviewed the official recommendation from their caseworker, which I will note is the strongest endorsement I have encountered in 23 years on this bench. She paused and something shifted almost imperceptibly in her stern expression. And I have read one additional piece of correspondence, a letter written by your son Leo, who is 5 years old. Her voice softened slightly. He wrote about how love grows bigger the more you give it away. He wrote that he wanted to share his father with two girls who needed one. Marcus felt moisture blurring his vision. At the bottom of that letter, in different handwriting, were two words, "Me too," signed by Hope Torres. Judge Morrison looked directly at Hope, who was still clinging to Marcus's hand. According to court records and professional evaluations, those are the first words this child has written in over a year. She set down the file and folded her hands. Mr. Webb, I've been doing this job for a very long time. I've learned that the most important factor in a child's welfare isn't money or a perfect house or checking every box on a government form. The most important thing, the only thing that truly matters, is whether a child is genuinely loved. Whether they are truly seen, whether someone is willing to fight for them when the world gives up. Judge Morrison looked at Lily, still pressed against Marcus's side, at Hope, still holding his hand like it was the only solid thing in her world, at Leo, watching with his mother's eyes full of hope and fear and love. It is therefore the decision of this court that the petition for adoption is hereby granted. Effective immediately, Lily and Hope Torres are the legal daughters of Marcus Webb. This adoption is final and irrevocable. Case closed. The courtroom erupted. Lily burst into tears, loud, hiccuping, uncontrollable sobs of pure joy and overwhelming relief. Leo jumped to his feet and pumped both fists in the air, shouting, "Yes, yes, yes," at the top of his lungs. Martha Greer was crying openly into her paper napkin, her stern face transformed by emotion. Diana Chen grabbed Rebecca Hartley in a fierce hug, both of them laughing through their tears. Even the court stenographer had stopped typing to dab at her eyes. And Hope, silent Hope, who hadn't spoken a single word in over a year, lifted her head from where she had buried it against Marcus's chest. She looked up at him with those pale green eyes, now swimming with tears that finally weren't from grief. Her lips parted, and in a voice rusty from more than a year of disuse, fragile as a newborn butterfly's wings, but absolutely and unmistakably real, she spoke. "Thank you, Daddy." The courtroom went instantly, completely silent. Everyone in the room froze, staring at the small girl who had just shattered over a year of traumatic silence with 3 simple words. But Hope wasn't finished. She looked at Lily, who was staring at her with wide, shocked eyes. She looked at Leo, whose mouth had fallen open. She looked back at Marcus, tears streaming down her thin cheeks. "Mama told us to wait," she said, her voice growing slightly stronger with each word. "In her letter, she said someday someone would choose us. She said when they found us, we should let them love us." A sob escaped from somewhere behind them. Maybe Martha, maybe Diana, maybe everyone at once. She was right. Hope's voice cracked but held. Mama was right. Marcus couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only pull all 3 of his children into his arms and hold on like he would never, ever let go. She was right, he finally managed, his voice breaking completely. She was absolutely right, and I'm so glad she sent you to me. 2 weeks later, Marcus took his family, his complete, whole, miraculous family, to visit Sarah's grave. It was a beautiful April morning. the kind Sarah had always loved best. Sunlight filtered through new spring leaves, dappling the grass with shifting patterns of gold and green. The air smelled of rain and growing things and new beginnings. They brought wildflowers, the kind that grew along roadsides, the kind Sarah used to pick during their walks, and arrange in mason jars on the kitchen windowsill. Marcus knelt before the granite headstone. Sarah Marie Webb, beloved wife and mother, 1984, 2016. Her love made us better. Sarah, he said softly, I want you to meet our daughters. Leo stood beside him, one small hand resting on his father's shoulder. Lily hung back slightly, uncertain, but Hope stepped forward without hesitation. She knelt on the grass beside Marcus and placed her palm flat against the cool stone. Hi, Mama Sarah, she said, her voice still soft but steady now, growing stronger every day. I wanted to tell you some things. Marcus felt tears sliding down his cheeks. First, thank you for sharing your family with me and Lily. I know you loved them first, before we even existed. I hope it's okay that we love them now, too. I think there's room for everyone. Lily moved closer, her arm slipping around Hope's shoulders. Second, I wanted you to know that I talked again. I didn't talk for a really long time because words felt too heavy to carry, but your family made them feel light again. Your son, Leo, he helped me remember that it's okay to let people in. Leo was crying now too, though he was trying very hard to hide it. Third, I think maybe you and my first mama are friends now. Up in heaven. I think maybe you planned all this together because both of you wanted us to be okay. And now we are. We really, really are. Hope pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket, a letter she had written herself with Diana's help over the past 2 weeks. We're going to plant these flowers for you, she said, so you have something pretty to look at. And we're going to come visit every week so you're never lonely, because that's what family does. They show up, they remember, they don't forget. She placed the letter against the headstone, weighing it down with a small, smooth stone. Thank you, Mama Sarah, for making a family that had room for 2 more. 1 month later, the Webb family pushed through the doors of the Riverside Family Diner at exactly 6:01 p.m. Same booth, same cracked vinyl seats patched with mismatched duct tape, same buzzing neon sign and foggy windows and smell of coffee and grilled onions that hadn't changed in 20 years. But everything was different. Martha Greer met them at the door with a smile that transformed her stern face into something almost beautiful. Table for 4? She asked, her voice suspiciously thick. Table for 4? Marcus confirmed. Same as every Wednesday. They slid into their booth, Leo and Lily on one side, Marcus and Hope on the other. Amy appeared with waters and menus, though by now she knew perfectly well what they'd order. 4 grilled cheese sandwiches, extra pickles for Lily, extra fries for Leo, and 1 slice of apple pie with the crumbly top to share, because some traditions were meant to continue. As they waited for their food, Hope looked around the diner, at the faded photographs on the walls, at the regulars in their usual spots, at the neon sign buzzing in the window, the way it had for decades. Daddy, she said softly. Yes, sweetheart. This is where you found us. Marcus shook his head gently. No, sweetheart. This is where you found me. You walked through that door, you chose my table, and you changed my life forever. I should be thanking you. Hope considered this for a moment, her pale green eyes thoughtful. Can we come here every Wednesday? She asked, like you and Leo used to, before us? Every single Wednesday, Marcus promised. Our table, our tradition, our family, for as long as this place stands. Lily grinned across the table. Leo cheered and pumped his fist. And Hope, miraculous, brave, finally healing Hope, smiled. Outside the window, the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of purple and gold. Leo's favorite colors, the colors he'd put in his drawing of home all those months ago. And inside, four hearts beat together in perfect rhythm. A family forged not by blood, but by five simple words spoken on an ordinary Wednesday evening by a starving child to a stranger. Can we eat with you? The answer was yes. The answer would always be yes.